seem to have an addiction to bad Pokemon countdowns, and I think I'll need to see a therapist someday. Also, happy April Fool's Day. The punchline is that my avatar's from Digimon. Yeah.
Hey Pokemon fans, Tamashii here. But not everyone loves the yellow rodent.
Tamashii? Are you calling yourself a yellow rodent? Is there something you're not telling us? Was there a line that you recorded for this but forgot to include? Because I can't think of any other reason as to why you would have that transition. Literally, you go, "Hi, I'm Tamashii, but not everyone loves Pikachu." And if that's not what you're trying to say, it certainly could have been worded better.
No one can deny that when you think about Pokemon, Pikachu is one of the first images that pops into your head.
When you think of Pokemon, what is the first thing that comes to mind?
Pikachu. So does this mean she's learning, or...?
And in every generation of Pokemon games, Game Freak has tried to capitalize on this by introducing a Pikachu clone to try to sell the new games.
For anyone who's asking, I will be addressing in greater detail the fact that an evolution of Pikachu is listed among the Pika clones later. For now, legit question. When has a Pikachu clone ever been used to try and promote a new generation? Or at least enough to be considered an actual influence on why the generation got anywhere?
For the most part, these little guys don't tend to be too popular, since they're pretty redundant by design.
So going by what we just said, they all fail.
Congratulations! Congratulations!
Okay, we're good.
But a lot of thought goes into how each Pika wannabe represents their generation. Each Pikachu clone has to capture what we love about Pikachu, while integrating something iconic from the game it's representing to really sell that feature to the public.
Not really. There's no real need for a Pika clone to integrate something from that generation to sell the feature, or vice versa. Hell, Pikachu didn't even do that. When Pokemon first came to be, it was just an electric mouse. It didn't promote trading, unlike version exclusives or trade-only evolutions. It was only after it and Pokemon became so popular that Pikachu got any special treatment.
So how well does each Pikachu lookalike represent its game? Today we're gonna rank all 5 of the Pikachu spawn and find out. But first, a little background on Pikachu.
This is filler. That's all this part is. This adds nothing in regards to what comes later. Even if it's just fun trivia, it wouldn't be nearly as egregious if you connected this to something else in the video other than "Hey you, Pikachu!" Otherwise, I could swap this out with a Young Thug song and literally get the same result.
My diamond just say Pikachu. They say Pikachu. I'm a boss, I walk to the club and say Pikachu.
Anyone else sensing a pattern with this list?
Number 5, Pachirisu. Generation 4 brought a lot of huge innovations to the series. With the physical special split, battling got a lot more balanced and diverse. And with the Nintendo Wi-Fi connection, Pokemon can now be traded around the world. There's a decent amount there to work with that's really unique to Diamond and Pearl, so certainly they could come up with something interesting for its mascot to really represent all these features, right?
Okay, I just have to stop you right there. Have you not read the definition of mascot? A person, animal, or object uses a symbol to represent a group, such as a sports team, and to bring good luck. That's how Merriam-Webster defines it. And with this in mind, how is Pachirisu a mascot? Pikachu, yes. Even without the clones, it's one of the most iconic Pokemon out there, and, well, it's called a Pika clone for a reason. Pachirisu? Hell, pretty much every other Pika clone too. No, none are symbols or represent anything. You want a mascot for Gen 4? Look at the box art. I'm pretty sure that's not Pachirisu. And funny thing, most mascots don't have a gimmick to sell for that generation, just their concepts, status, or design. Red and Blue, the mascots were the starters. Gen 2, legendary birds. Gen 3, behemoths that could control the weather. Gen 4, creatures in charge of time and space. Gen 5, yin and yang. Gen 6, life and death. Actually, now that I think about it, you could salvage something with Xerneas, as it is a fairy type and was introduced in the same generation as the fairy type itself. But there's a shit ton more to Xerneas than just low fairy.
Well, for the life of me, if Pachirisu is meant to represent any part of Diamond and Pearl, I can't figure it out. There's nothing in its name or design that reminds me of anything in the games.
Fine, I can fight fire with fire. The colors of Pachirisu are primarily white and blue. The white color represents snow, and the fact that Sinnoh is based on an island of Hokkaido, the northernmost region of Japan. You know what's usually north? Snow! Lots and lots of snow! And the blue could be a reference to the primary color of electricity, or the primary color that's associated with Wi-Fi. But that's just me thinking way too deep into this. AKA this list in a nutshell. Oops, did I say that out loud?
At first I thought maybe it was more abstract, like maybe its stats and moves would showcase the benefits of splitting physical and special moves, but its base attack and special attack are exactly the same.
But not space defense or special defense.
Sideways, its ears and the little line on its forehead could maybe represent signal bars and a Wi-Fi connection, but that's really pushing it. As much as I love Pachirisu for the way Seijun Park worked it into his team a couple years ago at Worlds, as a mascot it really makes the least sense.
Well, of course it makes little sense as a mascot. That'd be because it's not. These are, they are, this guy is, that guy isn't.
Number 4. Dedenne. Generation 6 focused much more on graphical overhaul than adding lots of features.
Board battles, sky battles, more directional movement, customizable character.
But it did introduce a new type, Fairy, so of course the mascot of this generation is half fairy.
No, the mascot for this generation is full fairy. Its name is Xerneas. It's a deer with multicolored antlers and sword legs. Your mascot is Rainbow Bambi, not this thing.
It definitely makes me think of Callus when I hear the typing, but just looking at Dedenne, there's nothing in its design that communicates to me that it is a fairy type, so it falls a little flat. Also, with Generation 6 having a huge focus on beauty in the region of France, you would think there'd be a better basis for its design than a Japanese dormouse. So Dedenne gets participation points since it doesn't outright fail to represent its region, but it doesn't stand out at all, and it fails to really sell me on the idea of a fairy-type Pokemon.
Hence why just telling me it's a Pikachu's job to do that doesn't really work. Keep in mind, this generation also provided us with a fairy-type evolution and 2 fairy-type legendaries, one being a mascot legendary. Even then, who would I think of as a fairy type before the Pokemon you said was meant to promote the type? How about the 4 Pokemon shown off when the type was first introduced? Also, why does Pachirisu fail as a Pikachu when it's objectively one of the better ones, as evidenced by the footage of it winning the World Championship in 2014? Even if it still fails as one, remember this?
For the most part, these little guys don't tend to be too popular, since they're pretty redundant by design.
You're arbitrarily throwing it under the bus because it doesn't have a gimmick.
Number 3. Emolga. It's hard to put my finger on one feature that Gen 5 brought to the table, since it's really known more for its ambitious story and strong characters than anything else. I mean, sure, it introduced triple and rotation battles, the dream world, and musicals, but when you ask people about Black and White, I'm not sure many of them would actually remember those things were in the game, since they were such a small part of it.
So right there, saying that a Pikachu has to follow this arbitrary standard is dumb, since the standout aspect of this generation is how set apart it is from every other generation in this series.
So how do you design a mascot to represent such a complex and story-driven Pokemon game?
You know, you get the point.
Well, it seems like they just kind of distilled it down to the core theme. Emolga is Black and White's mascot because it's black and it's white. Get it? Otherwise, it didn't really try very hard to work at incorporating more unique features from the game into its design. And with how many Pokemon in the Unova Dex use this color scheme to begin with, it took me a while to even notice what stood out about Emolga.
Here's something that should have stood out from the get-go. It's the first dual-type Pikachu. Sure, the typing isn't unique, but Emolga is still the first in this regard.
I guess if you really want to stretch it, Emolga's name in Japanese is Emanga, and Emon translates into garment or drape, which is a reference to the flaps on its arms, but it could also possibly reference the costumes your Pokemon get to wear in musicals, which are one of the worst parts of Generation 5.
Still something Gen 5 had, thus having something to follow your bullshit criteria.
If you asked me to design a Pokemon to be the mascot of Gen 5 that had to resemble Pikachu, I'm not sure I could really do better either, with how little Gen 5 offered feature-wise.
Even if it's not much, there's still triple and rotation battles. Have your Pikachu clone do something with that. Keeping in mind what your number 1 will be, have either 1 or 3 Pokemon work with the concept in mind.
So I give this one some credit anyway. It's not a terrible mascot, but it does illustrate how hard it is to really sell something on story alone.
That's why you'd have something that's very lore-based, something that has more to it than just design, something that's Kyurem. Well, I'm trying to describe as Kyurem, or at least Reshiram and Zekrom. You know, Pokemon that are actually promoted, unlike Emolga.
Number 2. Pichu. I know Pichu doesn't really count as a Pikachu clone, since it's actually just an extension of Pikachu's evolutionary line, but it does fill the mascot role for its generation, so it'll have to count for this list.
And you just shot your list in the foot. Pichu shouldn't be here since, unlike all the other Pika clones, they aren't related to Pikachu by evolution. Pichu is a direct extension of Pikachu. Sure, it's a pre-evolution, and ironically, it's the only Pokemon I see here as an actual mascot for being one of, if not the most popular baby Pokemon, but it's also related to Pikachu. The only context where Pikachu should apply to Pichu is Melee. Plus, in regards to Gen 2, there's another Pokemon that you could consider for this list. Meryl. This was the Pokemon that was originally nicknamed Pikablu for sharing similar elements with Pikachu. Oh, I see. It doesn't count because it's not an electric type. Well, by including Pichu, you're already stretching your options. If you really wanted to make a top 5 and not include Pokemon that would be cheating if they were included, let's wait until your number 1.
I think probably the biggest core mechanic it brought to the table though was Pokemon gender and breeding, so it's fitting that the mascot of this generation is only obtainable through breeding. Though I'm not much a fan of baby Pokemon, they were a clever way to introduce players to the new mechanic.
Excuse me, introduce? I'm sorry, but I don't care right now if you find Togepi or Togetic disappointing. If any Pokemon introduced the concept to players, it'd be the first egg you got. That's not Pichu, that's Togepi. Now fuck the rest of this segment. Also fuck this list.
And the number 1 Pikachu clones are Plusle and Minun.
Your number 1 are 2 Pokemon, for a grand total of 6 Pikachu clones on the list. Take out Pichu and not include Meryl, and you have a top 5. And if anyone tries to argue to Tamashii's praises for Plusle and Minun could be exactly the same and doing 2 separate segments would be redundant, I point to her top 10 worst gym leaders, where she did 1 segment covering multiple gym leaders not once, but twice on that list. This idea is not a foreign concept to you, Tamashii. You could have had them as your number 2 and number 1, and things still would have worked out.
Generation 3 was a big turning point for the series. We were leaving 8-bit behind, and all that went with it. So we had to really start over with a new world and lots of new features to introduce to people. Aside from moving up to 32-bit, double battles were the big selling point of Ruby and Sapphire. So of course, they required 2 mascots that each knew a double battle specific move, and had abilities, another new feature, to help them work together. With Helping Hand and their plus and minus abilities, Plusle and Minun tie everything about Ruby and Sapphire together in one cute package to sell to people.
I'm sorry, but if Plusle and Minun are there to tie up Gen 3 in one package, then Gen 3 must suck. Yes, they're there to promote the concept of double battles, but Gen 3 also had plenty of other duels that could do the concept, and better. For instance, Volbeat and Illumise, Latios and Latias, Solrock and Lunatone. The last 2 get special mention because the gym leaders that actually focus on double battles use those 2, and not the Pokemon that you said promoted the concept. In fact, you know what sold me on double battles? The actual battles, not the duels they created for it, and especially not a duel that can only really work in double battles. Speaking of, guess what game pretty much had nothing but double battles? If you guessed Pokemon Coliseum and or XD, you'd be right. With 2 entire games based around this type of battle, you get more practice as to what works and what doesn't work in doubles. Also notably, Plusle is in Coliseum, but not Minun. How does it perform? Terribly. While you could theoretically train it to be usable, it starts off at level 13, at a point where the last Shadow Pokemon you had to fight was level 35. Sure, while there are only 2 other electric types in the game, Flaffy is already available at this point and starts off at level 30, meaning that it can evolve almost immediately after purification. And the other electric type is Raikou, a fucking legendary. It would be unfair to compare the usefulness of a legendary to that of a Pika clone, but if you still think that Typhlosion is overrated because Entei is better, then I don't think this comparison is that unfair either.
Even the colors, Ruby and Sapphire. Unfortunately for a lot of people, it was just too different. With the bright palettes that could support a lot of different colors and the new gimmicks, so these mascots weren't very popular with a lot of people.
Oh, there's far more than just that. Nothing about how they're literally just Pikachu, but with red and blue instead of black? How about the fact that without double battles, they absolutely suck? Their abilities only work when the other's on the field, and without the other, they are weak and they can't do anything. At least the other duels don't need the other member to work in doubles. And that's even implying they'd actually work, since Plusle and Minun are very susceptible to a very powerful and very common double battle move, Earthquake. Even Pokemon who'd get plus or minus later on get this massive weakness too. And the fact that you need another Pokemon with a specific ability makes plus and minus extremely cancerous as abilities.
But I do still admire how committed to their concept they were. Game Freak really believed in the game they were making, and celebrated those games full out when designing Plusle and Minun. So to me, they're the epitome of Pokemon mascots.
Even if we just considered Plusle and Minun the best Pika clones, that's all they'd be. Pika clones. Hell, they're not even Pika clone mascots. That'd be the Pokemon they're clones of in the first place. And again, the other pairs. Why are they not celebrating the concept? Hell, taking this a step further, Latios and Latias are shown in the opening to Ruby and Sapphire, and their remakes, and are given focus in said remakes too. If no one else, shouldn't they be the mascots of Gen 3? And that's it. This has been Looking Too Deep When the Curtains Are Literally Just Blue, the countdown. You stretched so much to try and find something that these Pokemon seemingly needed to have, when in all actuality, all they needed to be in order to be good Pika clones is, well, to be good. Not to say the least of calling them all mascots when, even being generous towards this list, 3 of your 5 choices easily are not, and the 2 ought to be stretching to call either a mascot or a contender for this list altogether. They're not mascots, they're clones of a mascot. The closest I can even fathom for calling these Pokemon mascots would be the fact that every generation has something that looks like a Pikachu. But then we might as well call the first rodents and first birds of each generation a mascot. Can't wait for your top 6 Pokemon rodents to hear you call Bidoof a mascot. Alex, I blame you for this. Why did you have to die and kill my Altark / Rabbit Luigi shitfic? What will it take to bring you back? Hold on, let me go try something. See, what did I tell you? The only April Fool's joke in this video was me. Wait.